It was just another Tuesday night in the early spring. Quiet, uneventful. The kind of evening you forget as soon as it's over. I was sitting at the dining table, half watching reruns of a firefighter reality show in the background. My jacket was slung over the back of the chair, boots still muddy from a call earlier that day. Melissa had left out a stack of forms for our daughter Sophie, school stuff, pediatric checkups, and a sign-up sheet for a kindergarten art camp she was excited about. I picked one up, barely even looking at it. My brain was on autopilot. Just another day, another piece of parental paperwork. Then I saw it. Blood type. A positive. I blinked. That didn't make sense. I stared at the line again. A plus. It hit like an elbow to the ribs, not because of what it was, but because of what it wasn't. My blood type is O negative. Melissa is AB. We'd both donated blood during a Red Cross drive last summer. I remember it clearly because she fainted and made a joke about how, even giving blood, I find a way to be dramatic. I even had our donor cards taped on the fridge next to a pizza coupon. O and AB. Together we couldn't produce a child with A+ blood. I knew enough biology for that to sink in fast. I didn't blink. I didn't move. The sounds from the TV faded into white noise. I just sat there, paralyzed, gripping the paper like it was a live wire. Sophie wasn't mine. Biologically, at least. And I'd been there the day she was born. I'd held Melissa's hand through the pain, cut the umbilical cord with tears in my eyes, and told her she was the strongest woman I'd ever met. I stood up, slow, mechanical, like a man underwater. I walked into the hallway, pulled open the closet, and grabbed a small white envelope from the top shelf. The Red Cross envelope, our blood donor info from last summer. Inside were the cards, still crisp. I checked again. O-. A B, not compatible with A+, not ever. That meant someone else had been in my bed. Inside my wife, around the time Sophie was conceived. I leaned against the wall, trying to catch my breath. My chest felt tight like something heavy was pressing down. My mind raced, flipping through memories like old VHS tapes. The timing lined up. Exactly 6 years ago. That was when Melissa started changing. Little things at first. Late nights at work, shorter answers, longer showers, less laugh at her, less everything. I thought she was stressed, overworked, burned out from her job at the foundation. Hell, I told her to take a weekend off more than once. Go see your sister. I'll watch the kids, I'd said, trying to be a good husband, the understanding partner. But now I saw the puzzle snapping together. Every late-night text she'd brushed off. Every sudden shift in mood. The night she'd come home cold and quiet, only to flip and get passionately affectionate out of nowhere. I thought she was dealing with something internal, but it wasn't stressful. It was guilt. I opened the fridge, grabbed a beer, and walked out to the back deck. It was one of those Colorado nights that carries a sharp chill, even in spring. I sat in the creaky Adirondack chair, bottle in hand, and stared into the dark sky. I wasn't ready to feel anything yet. The anger hadn't arrived, the heartbreak hadn't formed. It was just numb. Still. Like my brain had hit pause. If you'd asked me yesterday, I'd have said our marriage was average. Not bad, not perfect, just married. Some laughs, some fights, a lot of laundry, a lot of bills, a lot of maybe next weekend. But looking back with this new lens, everything was off, everything was a performance, and I'd been the fool clapping from the front row. She had lied, not just once, but every single day for 6 years. And now the question crept into my bones like cold water seeping through cracked boots. What if Eli wasn't mine either? I looked back toward the house. The lights were off in the kids' rooms. The quiet hum of the dishwasher rolled through the window. Melissa was probably upstairs, watching one of those true crime documentaries she obsessed over. Fitting. I sat there long past when the beer went warm in my hand, long past the moment where shock became rage. I wasn't the man who flips a table, who screams, who throws things. That's not me. But that didn't mean I wasn't planning something. I just needed answers. Was it a one-time mistake? Or a full-blown betrayal? Did she even know? Or had she convinced herself I was the father? I wasn't leaving, not yet. Not because I was weak, but because I loved those kids more than my breath. I was their father, biology be damned. But this story, my story, it had just begun. And for once in a long time, I was the one holding the match. The night after I found out about the blood type, I barely slept. Not because I didn't want to, but because every time I closed my eyes, my mind dragged me into a mental highlight reel. 6 years worth of small, quiet moments I hadn't questioned until now. At first, they seemed like nothing. Melissa's coming home late from the office, hair up in a loose bun, face flushed, saying she stayed late for a donor meeting. I'd meet her at the door, lean in for a kiss, and she'd turn her head, offering me her cheek instead. The kind of thing you dismiss as fatigue. I told myself she was tired. I was, too. 2 kids under 5, a high-pressure job, and my shifts at the station were never predictable. But now every one of those excuses felt thin, hollow, like I'd been holding a balloon and calling it a brick. I remembered a Tuesday night in late fall. I'd gotten off a 48-hour shift. Smoke still clung to my skin. All I wanted was a shower and sleep. Instead, I walked into a candlelit living room. Melissa had picked up Thai food, poured wine, and even played that playlist she made for our first anniversary. She wore a tight red sweater I hadn't seen in years. Her lips found mine fast. Her hands were desperate. That night we made love like we hadn't touched in months. The next morning she was humming as she made breakfast, flipping pancakes in nothing but my old Firehouse t-shirt. I remember thinking, God, I've missed this woman. But by Thursday she was gone again, emotionally, mentally, and physically. She barely looked at me, fell asleep early, avoided touch. I thought it was stress whiplash. But it wasn't. It was the crash after the guilt high wore off. I saw it now. It was a cycle. Cold, then hot, then colder than before. And that I'd been too stupid, too trusting, too loyal to question it. Back then I thought love meant patience, that every couple had off months, dry spells, mood swings. I read blog posts about the 7-year slump, and convinced myself it was all part of the process. But that's the thing about lies. They rot your house from the inside out, and by the time you smell the decay, it's already in the walls. I started testing my memory like a detective, replaying conversations, trying to read between lines I once took at face value. There was the week she said she had to travel to Boulder for a donor summit, but I noticed she didn't pack a laptop. Just heels, dresses, and perfume she hadn't worn in years. When I asked if she wanted to bring Sophie's drawing to show off at the conference, she paused too long before answering. There was the weekend she claimed to have pulled a muscle during yoga, but flinched when I brushed her wrist. Her eyes darted just for a second like she wasn't sure what excuse to go with. I remember the way she looked at me during those months. Not cruel, not annoyed, but distracted, like she was watching someone else in her mind while I stood in front of her. Back then I blamed myself. Maybe I wasn't interesting anymore. Maybe the calloused hands and late-night shifts had made me hard to love. Maybe I'd become too predictable. Melissa had always been drawn to intensity, intelligent chaos, she used to call it, and maybe I'd turned too quiet for her. But now I knew better. She wasn't disconnected from me. She was connected to someone else. There were nights she'd come home glowing. That's the only word for it. Her skin would shimmer faintly, lips slightly parted, breath just a touch quicker than usual. And if I reached for her, she'd pull away, whispering, "I'm just so tired tonight, babe." I used to believe her. God help me, I did. Then came the laughter. Not the kind shared between us. Remember, this was laughter I'd hear through the bathroom door, a single giggle, or the buzz of a phone followed by a smirk she tried to hide. I told myself it was a friend from work, a meme, a moment. But now I knew. It was him. Whoever he was, he'd been living in the background of my life like a ghost, a presence I never saw but always felt. And I'd made space for him unknowingly. I fed his children, slept beside the woman he touched, showed up for a marriage he'd already burned holes in. By the time Eli was born, I was numb to the disconnection. It just felt like parenting. Exhaustion. Melissa and I became teammates more than lovers, co-captains of a household. She handed me bottles, I'd change diapers. We shared looks over spilled milk, but never touched outside of the function. Once I joked, "Remember when you used to jump me in the kitchen just for fun?" She smiled faintly and replied, "We're grown-ups now, Jack." I laughed. She didn't. At the time, I let it go. Now I wish I had looked harder, but I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. I needed facts, not just gut feelings, not just blood types or fading memories. I needed proof, because if I was going to make a move, it had to be precise, permanent, undeniable. The next morning, the weight of everything sat on my shoulders like bunker gear soaked in smoke and sweat. I went through the motions, coffee, packing lunches, tying Sophie's shoes, but my mind was elsewhere. Every I love you from Melissa sounded thinner, every smile more like a mask. That night, after the kids were asleep and Melissa had drifted off in front of the TV with a glass of wine in her hand, I moved quietly. I walked into Sophie's room first. She was curled up with her stuffed fox, lips parted slightly, soft breaths rising and falling in rhythm. She looked peaceful. It hurt to even look at her. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a sterile swab I'd picked up that morning from the pharmacy, and gently brushed it inside her cheek. She didn't even stir. I capped it, labeled it sample number 2, and kissed her forehead. Then I moved to Eli's room. He was sprawled out like a starfish, one leg dangling off the bed, snoring like a grown man. I smiled despite myself, then did the same. Swab, seal, label it sample number 3. Finally, I went into the bathroom, locked the door, and did my own. Sample number 1. I stood over the sink staring at the 3 tubes lined up on the counter. They looked so simple, so harmless. But I knew what they represented. The truth. And the truth had no interest in sparing feelings. I didn't know who to trust with something this sensitive. I couldn't just walk into a clinic and explain. Not yet. So I called someone I hadn't spoken to in almost 2 years. Marcus. He was a former paramedic, now working at a private diagnostics lab in Fort Collins. We used to train together before he moved on. Solid guy. Quiet. No drama. "Hey, Marcus," I said when he picked up. "Got a weird favor to ask, totally off the record." He chuckled. "If it involves stolen narcotics or hiding a body, I'm out." "Nothing like that," I said. "Just some swabs. I met a guy recently with the same last name as me. He wants to know if we're related. Think you could check for a DNA match? No names, just yes or no." He paused. "Yeah, I can swing that. Drop them off tomorrow?" I thanked him and hung up. The next morning I drove out early, handed off the package with nothing but a nod, and left. Then I waited. A week. 7 damn days where every second felt stretched out. Melissa didn't notice a thing. Or maybe she did, and just pretended not to. Either way, she was sweet, too sweet, making dinner from scratch, wearing perfume again, even asking if I wanted to get away for the weekend. It was almost laughable. Finally, my phone rang. "Marcus, you sure you want to hear this over the phone?" he asked. "Hit me." He exhaled. So, samples 2 and 3, full siblings, no doubt, but neither of them matches sample 1, no biological connection. I didn't say anything. "Jack, you okay?" "Yeah," I said, voice flat. "I figured, but thanks for confirming." I hung up, stood in my driveway, and stared at nothing for a long time. That was it. It wasn't just Sophie. Eli, too. Same father, not me. I'd been raising another man's children for years. Changing their diapers, holding their hands across parking lots, singing lullabies when they had nightmares. And now I knew the truth. But what stung the most wasn't biology. It was betrayal. I could have accepted a one-night mistake, a drunken lapse in judgment, maybe even a fling. But 2 children? That meant years. That meant secrets, layers so deep they had roots. Melissa hadn't just lied to me. She'd rewritten my entire life. I wasn't even angry at that moment. Not yet. Just hollow. There's a kind of silence that comes when your world shifts beneath you. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's surgical, cold, final. I walked back inside, past the photos on the wall. Sophie's first day of preschool, Eli's chubby newborn grin, a family selfie on a beach trip I now realized had been built on a lie. Melissa was in the kitchen humming again, stirring something in a pot. She turned and smiled. "Dinner in 10, she said. I smiled back. But my mind was already somewhere else. Somewhere darker, somewhere sharper. This wasn't just about knowing anymore. It was about what I was going to do with that truth. The day I decided to go digging was the same day Melissa's parents were expecting us for brunch. She was in a rush, packing Eli's diaper bag, curling her hair with one hand while calling her mom with the other. I faked a call from the fire station, claimed there was an emergency. Down power line, possible gas leak, needed all hands. She groaned but didn't argue. Said she'd take the kids without me and just tell them you got called in again. As soon as I watched her SUV pull out of the driveway, I grabbed my gloves and headed upstairs. I'd done this kind of search before, sifting through wreckage for clues after a fire. It was muscle memory. Don't waste time on the obvious. You don't find what someone's hiding in the kitchen drawer or the bookshelf. You find it in the cracks, in the places that people think you'll never look. I went straight to our bedroom. Her side of the closet first. Shoes, scarves, a box of Christmas cards from her sister. Then in the bottom drawer of her dresser, wedged between old sweaters and forgotten yoga pants, I found something out of place. Red and black lace. A lingerie set I'd never seen before. The tags are still on. Expensive. Sexy in a way Melissa hadn't dressed in years. Not for me, anyway. I stared at it for a long second, then folded it back the way I found it and moved on. The attic was next. She hated the attic. Said it gave her allergies. I'd always assumed it was just junk from before we met. Boxes of textbooks, high school yearbooks, maybe some old framed art she never hung up. But when I opened the hatch and climbed the creaky wooden ladder, I noticed something that didn't fit. Most of the space was covered in dust, untouched. But in the far corner, 3 plastic storage bins were stacked neatly. No dust. Recently moved. I opened the first. Junk. Some college notebooks, photos of trips I wasn't on. In the second, birthday cards, old calendars, random ticket stubs. Then, in the third, I struck gold. Or maybe poison. Tucked under a bundle of worn scarves was a stack of letters. Real letters. Not emails, not printed documents, handwritten, folded and tied with a thin red ribbon like a bad cliché. Beneath them, 2 USB drives and an old journal. My gut twisted. I took the letters and the drives downstairs, sat at my desk, and started reading. They were from someone named Grant. The tone was unmistakable, not sweet, not romantic, just raw, dirty, possessive. He talked about things he'd done to her, things she'd done for him. And then he referenced the kids, our kids. One line burned into my memory. You let him believe Eli's his too? You're more twisted than I thought, Mel. But damn, it's hot. I had to stop reading for a minute. My hands were shaking. I leaned back, stared at the ceiling, then back down at the paper. The next letter was worse. He talked about my house, my bed, the sheets Melissa had chosen, about how she wore certain things for him when I wasn't home. He even joked about how easily I fell for it all, called me the faithful fireman, like I was a character in some sick little game. There was no remorse, no shame, just 2 people getting off on betrayal. I plugged in the first USB. It was mostly photos, selfies, texts, screenshots of emails they'd exchanged, but then I found a folder labeled videos. I clicked. My chest went cold. The first clip was dated 6 years ago. It opened with Melissa sitting on a couch in a hotel room. She was wearing that same red and black lingerie I'd found in the drawer. Her hair was shorter, makeup heavier. She looked younger, nervous, but also thrilled. Grant was behind the camera, telling her what to do. She smiled, obeyed, stripped. I stopped it. I couldn't keep watching. Not yet. I opened the second USB. The file names were just dates. One of them was from a weekend I knew I'd been away at a wildfire training conference. That video? It was in our bedroom. My bed. I hit play, almost daring myself not to look away. She was laughing. He was barking orders. She followed everyone. It wasn't love. It wasn't even lust. It was something darker. Domination, performance, cruelty. Then came the part that changed everything. Her voice clear as day, mid-conversation. She was on her side, facing the camera, posted everything. She said, "Do you ever feel weird about Jack raising your kids?" Grant laughed. "Why would I? And the guy's a free nanny with a pension." She smiled. "I guess I feel a little bad sometimes." He snorted. "You didn't feel bad last night." I closed the laptop, sat back, breathed. Everything I thought I knew about my life had just been reduced to a folder full of videos and letters. But I wasn't broken. Not anymore. I was focused. And I wasn't going to confront her with just anger. I was going to bury her in the truth. Silently, cleanly, permanently. After I found the letters and videos, after I heard Melissa's voice saying those words, something inside me hardened. The Jack who'd once cried during Sophie's first dance recital, who used to surprise Melissa with flowers just because it was like he'd packed a bag and moved out. What was left was something colder, sharper. I didn't yell, didn't scream. I didn't throw the laptop or smash the USBs or storm into the kitchen demanding answers. I didn't even confront her. I went to the attic, put every item back in place exactly as I'd found it, and sealed the boxes shut like nothing had ever been touched. And then I backed up everything, photos, emails, videos, voice memos, onto an encrypted drive I hid in the lining of my turnout gear. Melissa would never go near my gear. Too many bad memories. Too much ash and smoke. Perfect. For the next few days, I became the most attentive husband on earth. I brought her coffee in the mornings, washed the dishes without being asked, massaged her shoulders while she scrolled through donor emails. She melted into it, thinking the tension between us had passed. She started humming again, laughing at dumb jokes, even reached for my hand in the car. And I let her. I played along. It wasn't hard. She'd faked a marriage for 6 years. I could manage 6 weeks. The first move came quietly. She was making lunch in the kitchen when I said, "Hey, do you still have that PowerPoint for the annual gala?" She turned surprised. "Yeah, why?" "I was thinking I could help you clean it up, add some visuals, you know? Give it that professional polish." She smiled, flattered. "Seriously? You want to help with my slides?" "Of course," I said. "You've helped me with everything. Let me return the favor." She opened her laptop that night and walked me through her plan. Photos of charity events, graphs showing donation growth, a mission statement she'd rewritten 3 times. I gave feedback, asked questions, and sat beside her like a supportive partner should. What she didn't know was that I was building a second version. One is nearly identical in structure, except mine included certain slides she'd never seen, screenshots, subtitles, a few carefully cropped video stills, enough to tell the story. Not all of it, just the part that showed who she really was. Enough to make a room full of high-powered donors, colleagues, and volunteers go absolutely still. I encrypted that version, created a hotkey switch, locked it tight. Once she tested the file and saw it looked good, she didn't double-check it again. She trusted me. Of course she did. This was the slow burn, the part where you keep the flame low, let the pressure build, and wait until the walls are ready to crack. And I was patient. Every morning I kissed her on the cheek. Every evening I held her in bed while she curled into my chest and whispered that she was lucky to have me. I nodded, kissed her forehead, and told her we were strong. Meanwhile, I was meeting with my lawyer. Divorce planning in the background, custody agreements, adoption paperwork for Sophie and Eli, documents that would make me their legal father, regardless of DNA. That was key. I didn't want to hurt them. They weren't at fault, but I had to make sure I wouldn't lose them if things blew up. Melissa had no idea I was already halfway gone. And then something unexpected happened. Denise. She was a communications consultant who'd done some workshops with our station before, sharp, confident, with a kind of quiet fire behind her eyes. We'd always had friendly conversations, nothing more. But that week she dropped by the station to finalize a public outreach campaign. She noticed something in me, or maybe she just saw through the smile I was faking. "You've changed," she said as we passed each other by the vending machine. I smiled. "For better or worse?" "Hard to say," she replied, leaning against the wall. "You look lighter, but also as distant." That was the first time I told anyone the truth. Not the whole truth. Just enough. "My wife's been unfaithful," I said, staring down at my coffee. "For a long time, I found out, quietly." Denise's expression softened. "Damn, Jack, I'm so sorry." "Don't be," I said. "I'm handling it, strategically." She gave me a look. Not pity, respect. We had lunch that weekend. Nothing romantic, just 2 people breathing the same air away from all the noise. But something shifted. When we talked, it wasn't heavy. It wasn't about wounds. It was about music, family, stupid things our kids had said, bad coffee, and the best slice of pie in Denver. For the first time in months, I felt human again. Not broken, not bitter, just present. But I wasn't ready for anything. Not yet. The fire still had one last place to burn. At home, Melissa was radiant, eager. She wore new perfume, cooked complicated meals, put on lingerie that had clearly been purchased for someone else, now rebranded as for me. And I let her believe it was working. Every thank you she whispered, every "I missed us" she breathed into my ear. I received like a man slowly nodding through someone else's lie. She thought we were healing, but healing requires honesty. And I was just giving her time to hang herself with a prettier rope. The gala was approaching. Her big moment, her redemption arc, her chance to shine in front of everyone who thought she was an angel. What she didn't know? I was the one holding the spotlight, and I was about to turn it on. The night of the gala arrived cloaked in false perfection. Melissa was a vision, Sleek black gown, hair pinned in soft waves, makeup flawless. She stood in front of the hallway mirror for nearly 20 minutes, adjusting her earrings, checking every angle. I waited patiently by the door in my rented tux, pretending not to notice how her hands trembled slightly as she dabbed on her lipstick. "You look beautiful," I said. She turned surprised. "You think so?" I smiled, warm. "Like someone born to be on that stage?" And she believed me. We arrived early at the event center downtown. The ballroom was lit in soft gold and deep navy in the foundation's colors. Waiters floated by with champagne flutes and smoked salmon canapes. Guests mingled in small clusters, clutching donation envelopes and complimenting each other's outfits. Melissa was the center of it all. Board members greeted her with hugs. A city councilwoman kissed her cheek. Even Grant was there, with his wife. I watched them from across the room. He looked bored. Caroline, his wife, was chatting with someone about their daughter's dance recital. She didn't have a clue what was coming. Melissa didn't flinch when she saw him, just gave a polite wave. A little too stiff, a little too fast. I saw the flicker in her eyes, though. That flash of anxiety was buried beneath the years of practice. We took our seats as the MC began the opening remarks. Dinner came next. Grilled sea bass, roasted vegetables, overpriced wine. Small talk flowed like water. I laughed at jokes, told a story about rescuing a cat from under a porch last winter. Melissa squeezed my hand under the table. When they called her name, she stood tall, gathered her notes, and made her way to the podium. She looked powerful, confident, poised, like a woman who believed she had finally rewritten her story. The room applauded as the screen behind her lit up with the first slide. Photos of the foundation's volunteer work, smiling kids, sunny community gardens. Her voice carried across the room with that perfect blend of warmth and authority she'd honed over years of public speaking. And then, the fourth slide hit. It wasn't one she'd seen. It wasn't in the version she'd rehearsed. A still image, grainy, dimly lit, but unmistakable. Her and Grant, in a hotel room. Melissa froze. Not a stumble, not a stutter. Frozen. The silence that followed was deafening. Someone coughed. A fork clattered against a plate. She turned her head slowly toward the screen, her body rigid as the next slide appeared. A text exchange, explicit and mocking, her name in bold letters at the top, then another image. "This one is in our bedroom." The murmurs started in waves. A gasp, a whispered, "Oh my God." Grant went stiff beside his wife. Caroline was staring at the screen, confusion hardening into horror. Melissa snapped out of it, fumbling for the laptop. Her fingers scrambled across the keyboard. Nothing worked. I had locked the controls hours earlier. No escape. Just the truth. Laid bare. Then the audio kicked in. Grant's voice echoed through the room, cocky and casual. "You think your husband suspects anything?" Then Melissa's reply, breathy, amused. "As long as I give him enough to feel loved, he won't look too hard." The room turned to ice. Someone stood up and walked out. Caroline remained seated, motionless. Her eyes never left the screen. Then suddenly she stood, picked up her wine glass, and without a word, emptied it over Grant's head before turning and walking away. Melissa's hands were trembling. She looked out at the crowd, lips parted, but no words came. Her cheeks burned crimson, her shoulders collapsed. She turned toward me, eyes wide and wet. "Jack!" she whispered into the microphone, barely audible. "How could you?" I stood up slowly from my seat near the front and smoothed out my jacket, walked toward her with deliberate calm, every step loud in the silence. When I reached the stage, I leaned in, close enough that only she could hear. "You want to ask me that?" She shook her head slowly, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "I thought you forgave me," she said, voice cracking. I nodded once. "I did forgive you, Melissa. Just not while you were still pretending." Then I stepped back and turned to the audience. My voice carried, calm and clear. "Thank you all for being here tonight. I know this wasn't the presentation you expected, but sometimes the truth doesn't come with warning labels." I turned to Melissa one last time. "You had a chance to be honest. You chose secrets. Now you live in them." Then I pulled out a manila envelope, placed it on the podium, and walked off the stage without another word. Inside that envelope, divorce papers, custody requests, and a copy of the adoption confirmation. Sophie and Eli were mine now, legally and forever. I didn't look back. Didn't need to. The sound of her sobbing followed me out of the ballroom like a ghost dragging chains. Outside, the air was crisp, clean, free. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Denise. Dinner this weekend still on? Her reply came instantly. Absolutely. And just like that, I stepped into the night, leaving the ruins behind me, still smoldering. The days that followed were strangely quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet. Like the silence that lingers after a fire has devoured everything and left nothing but ash. No more arguments, no more lies. Just empty rooms and the weight of what used to be. Melissa didn't try to fight the divorce. Not after the gala. She signed the papers the next morning, her hand trembling, her eyes swollen from crying. She didn't ask for custody, didn't argue about the house. It was like she knew she'd already lost everything that mattered. I moved into the guest room that same day, told the kids that Dad was just fixing up his own space. They didn't ask many questions. Kids feel energy more than they understand words, and I'd done everything I could to keep that energy calm. I still made breakfast, still packed lunches, still sat beside them on the couch for movie nights. I wasn't going anywhere, not from them. Legally, I didn't have to worry anymore. The court had finalized the adoption in a week before the gala. Sophie and Eli were mine, by law and by heart. No DNA could ever change that now. Melissa signed the agreement granting me full legal parentage. Maybe she thought it was a second chance. Maybe she thought it would buy her time, but it didn't. I wasn't staying. I gave her 30 days to move out, told her she could keep her car, some savings, whatever she needed to get back on her feet. I wasn't interested in destroying her life, just reclaiming mine. She cried, of course, sobbed. Sometimes at night I'd hear her pacing the upstairs hallway, stopping outside the guest room door like she might knock, but she never did. She knew. One evening she cornered me in the kitchen while I was chopping vegetables for dinner. "Jack," she said, voice soft, "can we just talk?" I didn't look up. We're talking. I mean really talk. About us. About what happened. There is no us, Melissa, I said, still slicing. Not anymore. She swallowed hard. I know I ruined everything. I do, and I deserve what's happening. But watching you walk out that night, knowing you were with someone else, it broke me. I set the knife down, wiped my hands, finally looked at her. You broke us long before that night, I said. I just finally stopped pretending it could be fixed. She nodded slowly, eyes glassy. I miss you. You miss the man who loved you, I said, not the one who finally saw through you. Then I picked up the knife and kept chopping. That was the last real conversation we had. Denise and I didn't rush into anything. After the gala, she gave me space, said she wanted me to find my center again before stepping into something new. But we texted, talked, laughed. She asked about the kids, sent me photos of dogs wearing sunglasses, and told me about the time she accidentally set off the fire alarm in her old apartment by burning microwave popcorn. 2 weeks after Melissa moved out, I invited her over for dinner. Just us. No pressure, no labels. She showed up with a bottle of wine and a bag of board games. We never opened either. Instead, we sat on the back porch, watching Sophie and Eli chase fireflies barefoot in the yard, their laughter echoing like music. They're amazing, she said quietly. Yeah, I replied, eyes still on them. They are. She looked at me, studying my face in the golden dusk light. You look lighter, she said, like you can finally breathe again. I turned to her, smiled, not the polite kind, but real, deep, earned. I can. We didn't kiss that night. Didn't need to. The connection was already there, building slow and strong, something honest, something earned, something we both understood wasn't built on need, but choice. Later that week, I took Sophie to the park. She was on the swing, legs pumping, hair flying in the breeze. Eli was busy digging for buried treasure near the sandbox. Sophie suddenly called out, "Daddy, higher!" It hit me then, how natural that word felt, how right. I pushed her higher, her laughter ringing out like bells, and thought to myself, this is what matters, not revenge, not justice, not even closure, just them, just us, just forward. I may have walked away from a fire, but I didn't come out burned. I came out forged.